Welcome to another episode of OGZ 50 Feezy. I am here with the Italiano. He is back in PA. And PA actually, surprisingly, George, is only like, what, 50 something degrees right now?
It was 52 degrees when I arrived, which was very surprising because I was expecting something much worse. However, we are expecting another Arctic blast this upcoming weekend, so I'm definitely looking forward to that.
Crazy. Yeah, 50 something isn't too bad. That's like a chilly night here in California. Not too shabby. But we have a great show for everybody. Today, we're talking all about Galaxy's Edge. And George has an idea to transform that whole area in a very unexpected way. We're going to talk about it, break it down up next on OG 50. Oh. Welcome aboard, everybody, to another episode of OG55. I am joined by the one, the only, the Italiano, back in PA just for a few, well, like 2 weeks, not too long. But George, how you doing today, sir?
Not too bad. Yeah, I got a little jet lagged a little bit, especially changing back coast times. Now I'm 3 hours forward of you. So like for almost 3 weeks, I was like in the same time zone, and it's like, oh well, yeah. If I talk to you, we're on. It's the same time, and now it's like, okay, now I got to subtract 3.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting too. Like, we won't get too far, off the beaten path here, but it was funny because when you're in PA, like I can call you like when I wake up before work. Because it's like, oh shit, it's already like 10 o'clock over by George. You know what I'm saying? It's technically not rude. It's still like, it's kind of like, 10 o'clock is not that early. You know what I'm saying? But when you're out here in California and I wake up at 6:30 or 7, it's like, I can't call up George now. This is way too fucking early, So it's interesting, the different time zones. But yeah, I mean, right now you're feeling like it's 7 o'clock, but it's really a 10 o'clock for you over there or almost 11. Well, no, 10, almost 10.
10. Yeah.
So it's crazy. But George,
I won't have to deal too much with the shortcomings of the back and forth of like adding and subtracting 3 hours.
Yeah, exactly. So Italiano, the other day we had a great live show. It was a lot of fun, and you brought up an interesting idea. We got a great question. I forgot what the question was, but we were talking about Galaxy's Edge, and you had an interesting idea to sort of reimagine Galaxy's Edge. Now, usually when we reimagine Galaxy's Edge, it's usually in the context of like Star Wars, but you have a totally different idea, which I thought was interesting. And you brought it to my attention today that we should do a whole video on it. So go ahead and I'll let you set the table and we'll kind of talk about it from there.
Absolutely. I believe the question was, and I forget who asked it, was, would you remove Star Tours from Tomorrowland and place it in Galaxy's Edge? And you had answered with absolutely, because like you have kind of like that OCD that you have a whole entire Star Wars land, and then you have this single individualized Star Wars attraction that's just sitting, out of place and what have you. And I said, well, actually, no, I wouldn't touch Star Tours. Excuse me. I would keep Star Tours where it's at. I would get rid of Galaxy's Edge and take the one attraction, which is Rise of the Resistance, which basically that's what everybody goes over to Galaxy's Edge for, and put it in Tomorrowland. So you kind of have 2 Star Wars attractions. It kind of helps a little bit of Tomorrowland, and you kind of have this notion of a land that should have been great, but just missed the mark, I think, anyways, and transform it into something completely new and different. And what I would pick would actually be villains, but I would do something completely different to what they have planned for Magic Kingdom as far as villains. But I would keep all the same kind of rock work and the transitioning from Frontierland into the villains area, because again, the similarities of that between California and Florida is what's beyond Big Thunder, and Big Thunder is in Frontierland.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. Interesting idea because I would even take it. Okay, if we're gonna do this, right? If we're gonna transform, excuse me, Galaxy's Edge into Villain's Land, I would sacrifice Rise of the Resistance because I have a feeling the big villains e-ticket that you guys are getting over in Florida is probably going to be similar to a Rise of the Resistance anyway. It'll probably be some trackless e-ticket kind of experience. I would eliminate if you're going to turn Batuu into Villain's Land. I would eliminate Rise of the Resistance as a Star Wars attraction and just retheme it to something villains, because I don't even know if there's enough room, to be honest with you, in Tomorrowland, no matter what they do with that, to fit that attraction. That's a pretty big ride. So they might be stuck out here, at least out here in California. I think they would be stuck with sort of like
It's called Demolish Autopia.
Yeah, well, I know. I wish we could. But they are for some reason.
They're stuck on Autopia.
They're stuck on it, dude. They've committed to this electric car stuff, and yeah. So, but yeah, I would transform that into a villain's ride. The rock work and everything is already very villainous, so that's what's intriguing to me. Like, your idea is very interesting because the rock work in Batuu, I can see that being a very villainous. If done right, you can definitely turn that into a Villain's Land pretty easily. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this isn't just, thinking like right now, but I mean, like, because we were also talking about with Mandalorian and Grogu, getting their own adventure on Smuggler's Run, where, again, I wouldn't even have Smuggler's Run. I mean, I get it. It's like a newer, updated version of Star Tours, but I would just add a whole complete adventure into Star Tours itself, featuring Mando and Grogu.
I mean, at that point, you could. What do you do with Smuggler's Run, though? The physical attraction for villains, though. What do you put there? What do you turn it into? That's a tough one. Rise of the Resistance is a lot easier.
Yeah, because you're going to keep the same ride system, the ride vehicles. Smuggler's Run, I would literally just completely demolish, because it's a big space that they have for that attraction, and maybe do, I don't know, like what else you would do, because again, you don't want to do like the Maleficent Coaster, because then you're duplicating what they're going to do in Magic Kingdom.
Right.
I would maybe do something like with the Cave of Wonders, maybe with Jafar.
That would be cool. Yeah, that would be really cool. Jafar is a really underutilized villain, I think. I would love to see something with him. I think he's fantastic. Jafar kind of like, he's very much like he's modern Disney, so to speak. I mean, it's almost 30 years now, right? It's been, but still, I still consider it kind of modern Disney. But it's kind of a modern age thing, but it still feels like the villains of like Walt's era.
Yes.
He's just a total baddie. You know what I'm saying? And not to be confused. Now, when I say baddie, not to be confused with this baddie.
Thank you for watching OG55. If you aren't
not that baddie. I'm talking about a villainous baddie, and Jafar is definitely a villainous baddie. But no, in all seriousness, though, I think that a Jafar attraction would be awesome. But yeah, I like this idea though, George, because whenever we talk about Galaxy's Edge as a fandom, we always talk about how to keep the Star Wars theme and kind of just add to it, which is good. I mean, I can see that, and likely the likelihood is that's what Disney would probably do. They'd likely keep Star Wars, but I think it's kind of fun to sort of play in the sandbox of like, but what if they didn't keep Star Wars? What if they did do, you have rock work there to play with already. It kind of works,
I feel like with Disney utilizing Star Wars, it works well when they're using it like for events or for like special occasions. Like when they did the Star Wars weekends at Hollywood Studios, it worked. When they do the Star Wars night after Disneyland After Dark series, like after the theme park hours operations are over, they have the Star Wars nights, they work. It's a separate upcharge, but at least you're going to get something worth kind of while, where if Disney's going to end up doing it, and then you have this land, it's beautiful, it's breathtaking visually, But if you're not going to have no meat and potatoes in that pot, then why even have that pot boiling in the first place?
Yeah. And this is the problem too, is that we have a real big problem with Star Wars right now.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I heard Skeleton and Key is great. We had a great guest on last night, Jay Brad. He said he's been watching Skeleton Crew, and it's been amazing. Really fun show, very like Spielberg-esque, or maybe even like Stranger Things, you know, that kind of vibe. That's awesome. But for the most part, Star Wars is in a really weird place right now, you know? And for some reason, Disney isn't really willing to have a little fun in this land. They're not willing to play like they are with the Avengers land. And I think the reason why they're not willing to play like they are with the Avengers land is because I think Lucasfilm is really kind of getting in the mix too much. Obviously, Imagineering, and we'll talk about Imagineering a little bit later, but obviously Imagineering is willing to sort of, you know, screw the timelines when it comes to Marvel. I mean, you can have the Chris Evans version of Captain America, and you can have the Falcon Sam Wilson Captain America in the same land, and there's no issues. Why is Disney holding back with Galaxy's Edge? I think the reason why is because Lucasfilm has an issue with it. You know, so Lucasfilm really needs, I think they need new leadership. I've said this many, many times. They need new leadership. They need to really get some fresh eyes in there, some fresh blood, and really, you know, kind of get that studio back on track. And then if you do that, then everything else will kind of fall into place. But as of right now, it's kind of rudderless, and it affects the movies, it affects the shows, it even affects Galaxy's Edge. And until they get the studio in order, I think Galaxy's Edge can be a big miss, because I think the studio is holding that land back. I really do. I really do.
I agree, because if you say it's completely Disney or WDI, then yeah, they would have the same notion of what they're doing with Star Wars with Marvel, which that's, as you had mentioned, that's not the case. So what is it? There has to be something in compliance to why they're holding back on Star Wars. Yeah, and it can, once again, not to point fingers, it goes back to Kathleen Kennedy.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's her studio. You know, I mean, people can blame Bob Iger. You know, they can blame Bob Iger all day long, but you wouldn't need Kathleen Kennedy's position if everything hinged on Bob Iger and what Bob Iger wanted. So you have, and this is the same thing I say about Josh D'Amaro. You wouldn't need a parks president or parks chief if Iger was the one making all the calls. Clearly, that's not the case. You have to blame the person running their division. So yes, technically Bob is the boss of all of them, but Josh runs parks and experiences. So for parks and experiences, he's the guy that should be held accountable. The buck stops with Josh, good or bad. You know what I'm saying? Same with Kathleen Kennedy. If it was just all Bob Iger, you wouldn't need Kathleen Kennedy's position. You obviously need someone running Lucasfilm for a reason. So it's the buck stops with her, the good and the bad. And she's done some good stuff, man. I'm not one of these weird, like, there's a lot of weird people out there that are like real weird about like Kathleen Kennedy. I don't hate the woman. I don't like, you know, there's a lot of obsessions out there about her. I think she's done a pretty poor job in a lot of areas running Lucasfilm, but I also think she's a great producer. And I think a lot of the stuff that has been produced out of the studio has been good. I've enjoyed a lot of it, but I think there's a lot of problems too, like big problems, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, they need to get rid of her. The buck stops with her. She's been kind of not doing a great job for a long time now. I think she demoralizes the fandom in a lot of ways. I don't think many people are really on the Kathleen Kennedy train anymore. Even people that have historically defended her are kind of off that train. It's time to move on. I don't know why Disney isn't really going there with it. I'm not really sure, but it's time. But I think when she leaves and we get new people in there, I think the land will improve, because I think that's what's holding it back. So we'll see.
I sure hope so, because it definitely needs it.
It needs it, and it needs. I don't know what the deal is with this kinetic energy, because, like, for example, I understand what Imagineering and Lucasfilm was kind of going for with this, like, live your own Star Wars adventure and have a very realistic sort of like experience, and I appreciate that, because when you walk into Galaxy's Edge, the sound, the sound package, right, is amazing. I mean, you can hear the ships flying over your head. It's pretty intense. It's pretty realistic. The problem, though, is that it's a Star Wars land, and music is such a big part of Star Wars. Whether you're talking about the opening theme song or just the various theme songs for various characters, like Leia's theme, what have you, right? Music is such a huge part of the Star Wars universe, and to walk into a land based on that franchise where music plays such a big role and have it musicless feels weird to me. It feels very, very weird to me. And, you know, okay, if you don't want to have Star Wars music kind of pumped into the bushes like you do in every other Disneyland, like Frontierland, Tomorrowland, what have you, what you could do is you could simply have alien roaming bands that go through the land playing music, you know, dun, 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 right? Have the roaming bands everywhere. Add that music organically where it feels realistic, but they don't. And it's like, come on, like, let's get on the ball here with some of this stuff, you know? So
yeah, I remember our buddy Slimer when he came out to Disneyland. It was his second time, I believe, out at Disneyland Park, and it was his very first time out at DCA. And when he was walking around Galaxy's Edge, I mean, even though he's been in Galaxy's Edge before, because he's a Florida guy going to Walt Disney World, to him, I remember we were walking around and he just said that Galaxy's Edge just seemed like so completely out of place for him, being in Disneyland Park for some reason. Now, I don't know if it was just because of the lack of kind of pulse within the land, or if it was just the land itself that he just felt like it was just completely out of the realm, so to speak.
I think the reason why it feels out of place at Disneyland, I don't think it has to do with the kinetic energy or anything like that. I think the problem is it's on a completely different scale and scope.
Yeah.
Compared to what the rest of Disneyland is. Now, to be fair, a lot of people had those concerns on Twitter in the lead up to the opening of Galaxy's Edge, and I kind of brushed off those concerns. I got to be honest, dude. When I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'll man up and admit it. I have no issue with that. But I was kind of thinking, guys, don't worry about it. The scale, it's not going to make a big difference. You're going to kind of weave through the trees, and you're not going to realize it. You know, by the time you get in there, you do realize it though. And I think that's what Slimer. I think that's what's kind of hitting it with Slimer. And Slimer, if you're watching, comment. Let us know if that's what it is. But I feel like Disneyland, the rest of the park has a certain scale and size to it. And you go into Galaxy's Edge and it's massive. And it just feels too big for Disneyland, and it feels separate from Disneyland. It almost feels like I'm in a separate park in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that.
You know, it feels very different. But in terms of the theme, though, a lot of people had issues with Star Wars as a land not fitting into Disneyland. I don't have a problem with that at all. And I've said it many times. I would argue Star Wars as a franchise is actually the perfect thing to put into Disneyland. You go into the marketplace in Batuu, it looks like a galactic adventureland, essentially. You know what I'm saying? Star Wars has a lot of elements, that cowboy thing, New Frontiers, the future. I know technically Star Wars is a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, but it's still the future for us. We don't live like that, okay? So there's all these elements of Disneyland kind of in that one IP, and I think as a theme that really works for Disneyland. It's almost like this giant homage to the other lands in a weird way. But the scale, the scope, the way you travel and kind of weave through, and it feels distant from the rest of the park, makes it feel like a separate thing, and it just doesn't feel like it fits in with the rest of it. Like Toontown, for example, feels like it's part of Disneyland, very much so. Galaxy's Edge doesn't, you know. So it's interesting, but we'll see, George. I mean, interesting idea with villains. You know, it's definitely a very creative idea. I could see it working. Will they do it? I don't think they will.
Yeah, probably not. They put too much money, time, and effort of what they did for Galaxy's Edge. I think if Galaxy's Edge was a complete like bomb, you know, then they may consider it. But I mean, Smuggler's Run does get people in there, despite that I'm really not too much of a fan of it. I mean, I would love to actually see Mando and Grogu get their very own attraction, not even adapted into either Star Tours or Smuggler's Run. I would love for them to just get their own attraction. And then Rise of the Resistance, as I said, that'll pretty much carry the land for now to eternity.
Yeah, because retheming it to villains would be very costly, and they would probably be better served just to build a villain's land from scratch in the symbol lot or something. But what they should do though is they should really address the issues in Galaxy's Edge. And to be fair, they've here and there have done that with the new fireworks show that it's an existing fireworks show that they play Star Wars music to. So from a different point of view, as you would say, right? They've done little things. They added Mando and Grogu as walkarounds, and Fennec from the Boba Fett show, and they're adding Mando and Grogu into Smuggler's Run. So they're trying a little bit, but I wish they would just go full bore. Get those alien bands in there. Get some life into there again. And really let's get some prequel shit in there, man. I love the prequels. Get some Anakin Skywalker. I mean, come on. You get Anakin in there. You get some Obi-Wan. That'd be fun, dude.
What is so frustrating for me is, especially when it comes from WDI's R&D group, a lot of the stuff that they produce is amazing, but like 9 out of 10 times you only see the product or the project one time in a limited amount of space, and then you never see it again.
Yeah, I know. Do they still have those little BD droids, the really cute ones?
As far as I know, I mean, they test them out here and there. They bring them out for like short appearances, but then that's it.
Yeah, those things are adorable. When we were at D23 this past August, they had those at the Imagineering Pavilion, and they were just so adorable. I got a bunch of video of those guys. They're great. Yeah, guys and gals. Guys and gals. I don't know. I don't want to. I don't know what gender they are, but they were absolutely adorable. Absolutely adorable. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see what they do with Galaxy's Edge.
Speaking of, like, you had mentioned like Anakin and everything, I would love to see a version of like Vader walking around, but like from the Obi-Wan series. So you have like his mask that's split, so you can kind of hear him talk in the Vader voice, but also the Anakin voice. So you can have like makeup and prosthetics for the facial, but then he'd have partial of the helmet on.
Oh, dude, it'd be awesome. There's so much potential with that, and if they want, they don't have to have like everything out at once. So you don't have to have Vader and like Kylo Ren like standing next to each other. You can have, it's a big enough land where you can have, maybe in the morning you have the original trilogy characters, and maybe in the mid-afternoon you got, Anakin and Obi-Wan standing there, and maybe in the evening you got Reylo.
And that's what they do. That's what they do over at Avengers Campus. Like that, certain times they have the certain eras of the Marvel characters.
See, and I don't know why they don't do that here. I would love to be able to take pictures with other eras. And that's the thing. Star Wars is generational. So give all generations of Star Wars fans a little something. I know there's a lot of people out there that are like, nope, just make it all the original trilogy. Nah, that's not the answer either. I don't want all or nothing anything. I want everything, Let the kiddos have their Filoni-verse, their animated stuff in there.
Yeah.
Right, with Ezra and all that. Let the old farts like myself have the OT, the people your age with the prequels, and the youngins again with the sequel trilogies. Have a mixed bag. And I
think it's funny when you said the old farts like me with OT. I was going to say occupational therapy.
Yeah, exactly. Occupational therapy. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like 2 years ago when I tore my hip labrum at Costco. That was like a come to Jesus moment for me. I was like, I'm really getting old. When I tore my hip labrum trying to get a watermelon out of a box at Costco. Thankfully, I made a full recovery, and OG bounced back pretty quick. So I'm good now. But dude, that was not my greatest moment for sure. Yeah. At least I could have. If you're gonna tear your hip labrum, at least go out like a little sexier than that, right?
Right. Like you could have came up with like your own like kind of story, like. Man, like I helped this woman from like getting mugged and everything, and like I shielded her, and like it was like
I took a bullet, and it was like no, getting a watermelon out of a box at Costco, so terrible. By the way, I don't know if you guys at home are on Instagram. There is an Instagram influencer called Costco Cat. She calls herself the Costco hoe. Kat
Yeah.
is with a K, I believe. So I don't know her exact handle, but you'll find her. If you search on Instagram Costco Ho, you'll find her. She is hilarious. And she goes to Costco and she does all this funny stuff, dude. She's one of my favorite follows. She's amazing. So shout out to Costco Ho. She's awesome. But our next topic, we're gonna pivot. We're gonna pivot to Imagineering. From what I understand, word on the street, George, they're celebrating an anniversary. Go ahead and set the table, bro.
Yeah, they are, and I thought this was a great crossover kind of conversation, because a lot what we were doing with the Galaxy's Edge and like possibly turning into villains and everything is basically just like a blue sky kind of what if. So a kind of like Imagineering fashion. I thought it was very very telling because yeah, WDI is celebrating 72 years of being what it is, like from the very beginning when it started as WED Enterprises.
Yeah. No, I think
himself.
Yeah, exactly. It's crazy. Imagineering is such an interesting animal. You know what I'm saying? Because you have people that do like animation, and there's animation, and that's what they do. It's for the big screen or the small screen, and you have people that do, in engineering jobs and things like that. The crazy thing about Imagineering is it takes all these different sort of like industries. It takes filmmaking, it takes engineering, it takes architecture, it takes science and all this stuff, and it really kind of it's all put into one giant like little perfect little basket, and it's kind of cool,
And that was one thing I never understood, because anytime like I was saying like when I was younger, like, oh, I would love to be an Imagineer. It's like, well, an Imagineer isn't just one title. It's not just like, oh, an Imagineer is just an Imagineer. Okay, well, what department of Imagineering are you interested in? Some of the ones that you had mentioned, there's engineering, there's architecture, writing, research and development, software, there's the IT, there's like a lot of different facets that make up the term Imagineer.
Yeah, it's a very unique sort of industry, and it's pretty cool. It's very, very cool, and it has really, look, I mean, if it wasn't for Imagineering, you wouldn't have the stuff that Universal's doing right now with like Epic Universe, and they do great stuff over there at Universal. We were just at Universal together just a few days ago on Sunday. They do great stuff, but all that stuff wouldn't be possible with Universal if Imagineering wasn't around. 72 years, man. I mean, that's awesome. It's a really, really cool organization, and what they started was just absolute. Well, what Walt and his crew, what they started was absolute brilliance, and it'll be around, many another 72 easily. I think,
Yeah.
I think there's always gonna be a place for Imagineering, whether Disney is around or not. Imagineering in some form will live on. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do hope, like, in time, like, even if it's not in the same format, that they do like another kind of series of like the Imagineering story, because I love that. I love going behind the scenes and learning the ways of how Imagineers think and how they brainstorm and what they blue sky. And I love going through the obstacles, the ups, the downs, of like what it takes to get something from an idea down onto paper into an architect, like a sculpture, to an actual working attraction.
Yeah, it's cool, man. It's cool. It's you're like a filmmaker, but you're doing it in like the real world. It's crazy. It's not just on screen. You're able to build these environments and these experiences for people to actually live. And it's wild to me. It's a great industry. So yeah, congratulations to all the men and women of Imagineering. You guys and gals are absolutely awesome. We love you. Keep doing what you do. Shout out to Joe Rody and his earring, and we love you too. But the Italiano, thanks for hanging out tonight. I know that you are pretty jet lagged, so it's Not easy. That's why I was like, man, are you sure? There's a lot of travel time, and you've had a busy few weeks. So, but yeah, thanks for hanging out, brother.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I felt like I still wanted to do something, and it kind of like the concept still kind of sat on my mind when it was brought up during our live, and I thought it could be a little bit of an interesting topic to kind of dive into it a little bit more, and tie it into the anniversary of Walt Disney Imagineering for sure.
Absolutely. Where can and everybody at home comment down below with all your favorite things, memories, attractions, whatever it is about Imagineering, 72 years, and also comment down below with your thoughts on Galaxy's Edge being transformed into a villain's land. Do you like George's idea? What are your thoughts on that? But George, where can everybody at home find you on social media, sir?
Absolutely. And also, if you have another idea, if you think something else would go better than villains, definitely feel free. Put on your Imagineering hats and let us know also down in the comments. But if you'd like to find me on social media, you could do so on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Disney George. You could also find me on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky under the Disney Italiano. And of course, you can find me right here on my home base at Orange Grove 55 with Citrus Corner, with all that sweet, juicy, but sometimes sticky Disney news and info.
And we're going to end it like we always end it, with the lovely, the beautiful Asian queen with 3 E's. Check her out on Instagram. She is awesome. She has amazing like little reels and stuff where she's singing and rapping. She's great. Absolutely great. But check her out. She's a Canadian, just like our boy Seymour. So, we love our Canadians. But anyway, take it away, Asian queen. Here we go.
Thank you for watching OG55. If you aren't already, consider becoming a member today.